Hey, welcome. I hope you guys are doing good. Thank you for joining me. Today's reading is the person on your mind. How do they think you perceive them? How do they think you see them? How do they think you feel about them? We'll see what messages come through, okay? But we have three groups for you to choose from: group one, group two, and group three. Feel free to pause the video if you need a moment to choose your group, but I will see you guys in your readings. Hey, welcome. If you've chosen the first group in this reading, could be for you. We have the Queen of Wands in reverse, Five of Cups upright, and the Magician in reverse. Okay, so how do they think you see them? So the person you're asking about, they could actually think you see them as jealous of you, maybe of your relationship or your relationships with other people or someone specific in your life. They could be, jealous of something else you have going on, or they think you are jealous, that they think they are jealous of certain things you have going on. They do think you see them as attracted to you. They could think you feel they are intimidated by you, but they also feel that you are intimidated by them as well. They do think you see them as a bit insecure. This could be in general, or it could just be where you are concerned, or in a specific area of their life, or with relationships. But they do think you see them as insecure. They also think you see them as quite emotional, but also unempathetic to you or to other people. They think you see them as not assertive, or just not assertive enough. Maybe not assertive with certain people in their life or certain situations. They also think you see them as kind of like weak. They also think you see them as lazy, not very motivated, and this may not be in general. It could be when it comes to you in particular. So they could think you see them as not motivated when it comes to you, or not making an effort when it comes to you. It could be in other areas of their life as well. Or another specific situation where they think you feel they're lazy, but they do think you see them as not being motivated, maybe when it comes to like their job, or their career or something like that. Maybe progressing, or developing in some way. So they also think you see them as judgmental, demanding, and kind of self-righteous as well. They also think you see them as feminine, or just having like a lot of what would be considered, feminine, characteristics or traits. They could think you perceive them as quite unattractive. They do think you see them as stuck. They think you see them as quite boring and inhibited, and they do think you have a problem with that. They do think you're fearful of them as well. For some of you, it might not be that. They could think you see them as someone who is quite fearful or worried, or they could think you're worried about them. They do think you see them as not having much friends, maybe not having a support system, or not having many people around them. But they do think you see them as having a lot of fears. They do think you see them as independent, though. They think you perceive them as maybe dishonest, manipulative as well. They also feel that you see them as depressed and maybe kind of depressing, maybe to be around. They do think you see them as focused on the negative. They also think you see them as wanting to work things out with you, but not knowing how to. And they think you see them as not knowing how to make changes, either for you or for the relationship you guys have, maybe make changes in their own life. But they do think you see them as not being able to adapt. And they think that you want them to either grow up or just, grow and not be stuck and stagnant or, set in their ways when it comes to their life in general or when it comes to specific areas of their life. They also think that you want them to stop being emotional. They could think you see them as going through like some form of separation, whether this be a relationship. They could think you see them as going through a divorce or a breakup for some of you guys. But they do think you see them as needing to get over things faster. Like, wait, hold on. For some of you, they could just think you see them as like quite slow in general, like a slow mover, or maybe communication is slow with them, progress is slow, or something else in their life is slow. So they could think you see them as a bit slow. But for others of you, they could think you see them as slow when it comes to getting over things, when it comes to maybe moving on from certain things. But they do think you see them as not really living up to their potential, that they're not a good partner or maybe not a good leader or wouldn't be. And they also think you see them as not very grounded, maybe struggling to manifest their goals or some of the things that they do want in life. So we have detox. We have get some sleep. What does it say on the back? So on the back it says you are being an arse because you're tired. Okay. So we also have teeth, take a big bite out of life. We have food, be mindful of the thoughts that you are ingesting. We also have value, your self-worth. Reveal your true self, revealing your true self. As you allow others to know the real you, you'll feel loved for who you truly are. We also have finding the path. You are the navigator. No, you are the driver and the navigator. So I'll do these ones after, but I'll just see what these ones are about first. So with detox, they actually think you might need a detox from them. They could think that's what you're doing at the moment. They could think maybe you're taking a little break from them, maybe a little step back, even if this could be physically, it could be emotionally, mentally. But they also think you see them as not valuing you. They think you see them as maybe not valuing what you say, or maybe, something that you're, do. So with food eating, be mindful of the thoughts that you're ingesting. It feels like they think that you see them as not being mindful of you, not being nurturing or caring or affectionate with you. So with teeth take a big bite out of life, they think that you see them as kind of just existing and not living, and they do think you see them as needing to live more, you know, maybe needing to participate in life a bit more, you know. So they do think you see them as having hid their true self, with revealing your true self. They think that you see them as having hidden who they truly were or are, and they do think you are starting to see them more for who they are now. Like they just think that you see that the mask is slipping a little bit or has slipped completely, you know. So they also think that you see them as not knowing the real you, not understanding the real you, or caring about the things that, you know, mean a lot to you. They could think you see them as a bit dismissive of you as well, or some of the things that you do. So with finding the path, they actually think that you're tired of trying to find a path with them and kind of, you know, stay on that path. For some of you, they could think that you're tired of being the one to make the effort. And they could think that you see them as not taking control, whether that be with you or in other areas of their life. So with get some sleep, they could think you see them as uptight about certain things. They could think that you see them as needing to, you know, relax and not take certain things so seriously. And finally, we have busy, we have serious, we have philosophical, and we also have reserved. So they, with busy, they could think you see them as busy, maybe preoccupied, maybe, you know, trying to keep busy with other things. Maybe not spending much time with you, or, you know, just, you know, keeping themselves busy with things that maybe, let me see. For some of you, they could think you see them as keeping busy with certain things that don't really matter. They do think you see them as taking things, you know, maybe too serious, or just, you know, being too much of a serious person. And with philosophical, they don't necessarily think you see them as philosophical, but they do think you see them as maybe very analytical. And finally, they do think you see them as quite reserved as well. But that is all I have. So it just feels like they think that you want more from them, you know, and they could think that you are maybe growing tired with them or with certain things in your relationship, maybe some of the things that I have mentioned. But that is all I have for those of you who chose this group. I do hope it could be helpful and make sense, and I'm wishing you guys the best, okay? Please take care. Bye. Hey, welcome. If you've chosen the second group in this reading, could be for you. The person on your mind, how do they think you perceive them? How do they think you see them or feel about them? We have the Ace of Wands upright, the Fool in reverse, and the Justice card upright. Okay, so they do think, So they do think you see them as very passionate. For some of you, they could think you see them as a bit of a player or just having, just kind of like playaways, maybe in the past or, at the moment. But they do think you see them as used to getting their own way, they do think you see them as energetic, a good communicator, or just someone, let me see, or maybe just someone who is talkative, and they could think you see them at times as grounded and ambitious. They also think that you see them as popular, maybe amongst their friend group or social circle or at their place of work or in social settings. They could think that you see them as very attractive as well, interesting and exciting. They think you perceive them as spontaneous and adventurer, very active and maybe liking to travel. They do think you see them as a bit rebellious though, and motivated. They do think you see them as a leader or someone who does, try to be a leader or, take charge in certain areas of their life or in like a specific community or in, for example, like their home or in their friend group or in their family. But they do think you see them as independent as well, very charismatic. They do think you see them as being up for a challenge, but also as someone who is a challenge for you. For some of you, they could actually think you're trying not to fall for them, or they think that you're trying to resist them in another way if you're not asking about like a romantic connection or anything like that. Um, Even though they think you see them as someone who can be adventurous and stuff like that, they do think you see them as not having much freedom right now. They could think you perceive them as too idealistic at times, maybe too impulsive, or just in specific areas of their life. They do think you see them as hardworking though. They could assume you see them as taking advantage of certain people or certain situations. They could also think you see them as not always making the smartest or wisest decisions. I don't know if I've said this already, but they could think you see them as very attractive, very sexy as well. They do think you see them as a bit silly, goofy, and at times frustrating or annoying. For some of you, they think you see them as not having much confidence in you, or not having confidence in or trusting some of the things that you say, or just doubting you in general, or just some things about you or some things that you do, even if it's for no reason. So they could think you see them as kind of nitpicky maybe when it comes to you. And for some of you, they do think you see them as being naive at times, sometimes immature, and as someone who doesn't really take certain things seriously. And so, yeah, They also think you see them, I think I may have said this already, but they think you see them as taking advantage of someone else, possibly using their power, their looks, their talk, their charm, or something else to get their way. They also think you see them as not very smart and not very generous, whether that be, with you or towards some, towards certain people in their life or in certain environments. They could also assume that you think they are always procrastinating, maybe when it comes to something specific. They don't necessarily think you see them as a procrastinator in general. And they also think you see them as really caring how other people see them, caring about how they're perceived, maybe caring about their looks or their appearance, or just how they come across to other people. They could also think you assume everything works out for them and goes well for them. They they do think you see them as maybe needing to be right all the time. For some of you, they could think you see them as right or correct about something specific. And for some of you, they could think you perceive them as a bit judgmental in some situations, but they also think that you see them as quite unbiased in others. They do think you see them as wanting power. They think you see them as competitive. And I think I said this a million times, but that things always work out in their favor. And they could think you see them as a bit manipulative, but they also think that you see them as open to compromise about, certain things as well. They could actually think you see them as open to compromise with you specifically. So we have you are being shady. We have stop talking, and on the back it says be quiet and listen. We also have turn over a new page. We have internet, embrace the fact that you are the world. We have award, accept your well-earned praise. We have prosperity. There is a positive shift in your flow of divine support. And we also have deep emotional healing. And I will do these ones after. So with you are being shady, at times they do think you see them as not saying exactly what they mean. For some of you, they could think you see them as indirect or just hinting at things, like making innuendos, or they think you see them as like maybe literally shady for some of you guys. With stop talking, at times they could think you see them as maybe talking too much or not listening enough. It could be both, it could be one or the other. So with prosperity, they could think you see them as experiencing positive changes, or they could think you see them as maybe quite lucky. Or again, like just they think you see life or certain things in life being easy for them or coming easily to them. So with internet, for some of you here, they could think that you see them as liking attention, wanting attention, or feeling like they are the center of attention. with turn over a new page, they could think you see them as changing, or you think you see them as, trying to initiate change in their life, or just kind of being set on a different direction than they were on in the past. So with award, they could think you see them as maybe readily accepting praise, or they could think you see them as someone that is admired by other people. With deep emotional healing, they could also think you see them as someone who's maybe not very emotional or just not very connected to their emotions. And finally, we have cautious, predictable, smooth, and we also have imaginative. So I don't know about imaginative, like that could be the case. They could think you see them as imaginative, but for some of you, they could just think you see them as someone that's quite expressive. With smooth, they could think you see them as quite smooth, maybe like a smooth talker, or again, like things just kind of run quite smoothly with them, or they always just kind of figure things out or land on their feet. And finally, they also think you perceive them as someone that needs to be more predictable and someone that needs to be more cautious and just practice more caution in certain areas of their life. But that is all I have for those of you who chose this group. I do hope it could make sense and be helpful, and I'm wishing you the best. Okay, take care. Bye. Hey, welcome. If you've chosen the third group, then this reading is for you. The person on your mind, how do they think you see them? Okay, so we have the Tower upright, Temperance card upright, and the King of Pentacles also upright. Okay, so the person that you're asking about, they could actually think you see them as a bit rough around the edges. They could think you see them as a bit harsh, or maybe, quite blunt or direct. They do think you assume they are stubborn, maybe not open to change. They do think you perceive them as kind of cold or being cold at the moment, or, quite unfeeling or kind of apathetic. They think you assume, so they assume that you don't think highly of them as well. They think that you don't trust them entirely, but they do think you see them as a bit mean in general, to be honest, and unfriendly. But they do think you are curious about them. They think you assume they are struggling and going through a loss or just going through a difficult situation or phase. And for some of you, they do think you see them as having a lot of traumas, a lot of things that they haven't maybe processed yet. They do think you see them as isolated or being isolated or intentionally isolating themselves. And for some of you, they could think you see them as not welcomed, or, or not made to feel comfortable or accepted in certain environments, or, around certain people. And they think that you, as well as other people, see them as kind of unapproachable, whether that be at the moment or whether that be in general. But they do think you see them as impulsive, maybe difficult to read. They could sometimes get the impression that you are maybe pretending to be nice to them. They do think you see them as needing to rebuild their life. Or a certain area in their life. They do think you see them as determined, though. They think you see them as assertive and confident, but in certain areas of their life, they think you see them as fragile, or just certain areas of their life being quite fragile and maybe unsteady. They assume that you are anxious around them, or feel the need to be on guard with them. They do think you see them as kind of drained, maybe being in a dangerous or precarious situation. They could think you see them as trying to heal or recover from something. They do think you see them as maybe trying to stay calm, either with you or with someone else. But they do think you see them as either negative or just having a negative impact on you, or other people or someone in particular. And they do think you see them as trying to cooperate, trying to go along to get along type of thing. And they could think you see them as not being able to plan too far into the future, maybe due to certain circumstances. Now they're not able to plan too far ahead into the future. Or they could think you just see them as someone who is short-sighted in a way. But it does feel more so like they think you see them as not being able to create maybe plans, maybe with you specifically, or just just too far ahead into the future. They could also think you assume they are unable to see other people's perspectives or your perspective. They could think you see them as maybe a little closed-minded. They do think you see them as trying to manage their emotions, though, and they do think you see them as trying to go with the flow a bit more. So they could also think you see them as both masculine and feminine. So they also think you see them as reliable, or at least trying to be reliable. At the same time, they think you see them as needing to step up a bit more, maybe needing to be a leader, or be stronger in some way. And they do think you see them as focused maybe on their career or another passion that they could have. They do think you see them as wise, mature, and at times someone who gives good advice, and as someone who generally does have morals. They also think you see them as being a good teacher, or having the potential to be a good teacher. And they also think you see them as wanting respect, or wanting to be a good provider, and maybe to be financially sound. So we also have don't force it. We have you need a big hug. We have ceremony, honor how far you've come. We have naked, dare to bear all. We have balancing your masculine and feminine energies. We have socialize or join in. And we also have ending a trauma. So with you need a big hug, they could think you see them as needing emotional support, or just maybe needing like an emotional release. But they do think you see them as not having much support, especially with like socialize or join in. They could think you see them as not maybe having many supportive relationships or people in their life. And they could also think you see them as maybe not wanting to socialize or joining at the moment. So they also think you see them as someone you can't force, someone that, can't be pushed, like maybe someone that does things in their own time. So with naked, that's about all. They could think you see them as maybe needing to be more vulnerable, maybe needing to air out their problems, needing to talk, needing to get certain things off their chest. They could also think you see them as having come a long way. So for some of you, they could think you see them as understanding more about masculine and feminine energies, or they could think you see them as, having a combination of both those energies. For some of you, it might not have anything to do with masculine or feminine at all. They could just think you see them as maybe trying to find, balance in their life or certain areas of their life, or maybe in, their relationship, maybe with you in particular. And finally, they do think you see them as trying to end a trauma, trying to maybe get over something, maybe trying to, end certain challenges or, road bumps that they have been facing. And finally, we have political, we have fair, we have sensitive, and we also have perfectionist. So they could think you see them as political or having an interest in politics for some of you guys. For some of you, they could think you see them as trying to fight for something. They could think you see them as quite active. So for some of you, they could think you see them as needing to be more of a perfectionist. But I think I said earlier, like they do think you see them as maybe kind of rough. They also think you see them as maybe going through some raw emotions at the moment, and they could also think you see them as either fair in certain situations or trying to be fair. And they could also think you see them as being treated fairly, or it's like like however they're being treated, they could think you see it as justified, So like if they are being left out or isolated, for example, they could think that you agree with the reasons as to why they're being left out, and you kind of think that the treatment of them is kind of justified and that people do treat them fairly, whether that's, a positive or whether it's, a negative. Okay. But that is all I have for those of you who chose this group. I really do hope it can be helpful, and I'm wishing you guys the best. Okay. Take care. Bye.